introduce the chairman of YouGov Stone, the founder of the Stone Club, and the woman I love, the one and only Carol Stone.
That's very sweet.
Well, where'd you go from there? Thank you very much indeed for coming. I can't tell you the pleasure I get in welcoming you when you come. You see all the names, you look at the list beforehand, and then there you are in person. So thank you very much indeed. The Stone Club members, the YouGov Stone think tank, and people who are just interested to come along tonight. We're very, very pleased to see you here. I'll get straight on with it as we're just a few minutes later. We might just go 5 or 10 minutes over because we're a bit late, and if you have to leave, we understand, but we hope you'll stay. So now, the US elections so far and what they mean for British interests. Over to our chairman for the evening. A great welcome to the senior anchor for BBC News Channel, John Sopel.
Carol, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and thank you so much for coming this evening. I guess it looks a little bit more likely now that it's going to be Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama come November after the Michigan and Arizona primaries, but we still have Super Tuesday next week to contend with. I see the title is What It Will Mean for British Interests. The one thing you can confidently predict over the next few weeks is there'll be precious little discussion of foreign policy among the candidates. Herman Cain tried it. It didn't turn out very well for him when he tried to remember Libya, where was it, what was it about, whose side are we on, and what are we actually doing there. Wasn't very, very convincing.
He didn't talk that fast.
Yeah, but if it is Mitt Romney and he wins in November, I'll make a few confident predictions. There'll be an absurd race in the European embassies of Washington, D.C. to get their Prime Minister or their President to be the first one in to see Barack Obama. There'll also be a slightly less significant race, which will be who will be the first Prime Minister or President to make the phone call to congratulate him the day after the victory. And then let me just spin forward a tiny bit so that when the British Prime Minister does go to meet the President after he has been elected, he will travel with a plane full of journalists, where Downing Street will be doing their best to talk about the special relationship not being so important anymore, and we must take a mature view on it, that when they then go into a dinner with the President and Prime Minister, if it was scheduled for an hour and lasts an hour and a half, Downing Street will be saying, look, the special relationship is alive and well, these people are so close. Anyway, where are we now? We've got a fantastic panel who are going to discuss some of the issues. And before I introduce the panel, I want to introduce the non-panellist who is here to guide us through some of the latest polling figures, because Stefan Shakespeare, co-founder of YouGov, has been doing some of the number crunching. And he's going to stay on hand. If we've got any questions for him about the way the race looks, then he will take us through it. But Stefan, thank you very much.
Thank you very much and welcome. We do an awful lot of polling in America. We do it for The Economist and others. This is our first slide. It shows this incredible roller coaster we've been having in the Republican primaries. Almost everyone except for Ron Paul, he's the only one that's consistently low. But there's three people there that have all hit the top. In fact, this is probably the first time we've ever had a primary race in which there have been 6 different leaders. In addition to Romney, Gingrich and Santorum, Michelle Bachmann, Herman Cain and Rick Perry have all been leaders at one point. And I think, as I say, this is a first. We have Santorum there rocketing up and, in fact, going ahead of Romney. In case you think this is a poor prediction for yesterday, it wasn't that. This is taken amongst Republican voters across the US rather than in the specific states. And I should, just to comfort you about the numbers ahead, tell you that we, in the 2 years ago, in the last race, or 1.5 years ago, we were the top of Huffington Post's league table of pollsters, not only for the main races, but for something like 50 different races. So you can trust these wonderful figures. The next slide shows, because we are still looking at Santorum, he is still a contender, what is it that people like about him? Because Mitt Romney there, you see, is seen as somebody who doesn't really take positions and sticks by them. Rick Santorum is somebody who's absolutely seen as sticking by his decisions. and quite clearly seen as a conservative. In fact, there's 12% of people there who think he's moderate, and even 2% who think he's liberal, but some randomness in all polls. He's clearly seen as somebody who knows where he stands. These next two slides are interesting because what we see there, we ask you, do you have a favourable or unfavourable opinion? And these are, by the way, registered Republican voters, not the general public. They have a more favourable view of Rick Santorum than they do of Mitt Romney. But when we do a head-to-head and we do sort of first preferences and then who's left, so we go to head-to-head between the two, we see that actually, and this is the first time we've seen this, that Romney, on the eve of those polls yesterday, was in fact ahead of Rick Santorum and in fact ahead of all the others. That's the first time. And since they actually prefer Rick Santorum, one can only assume that there is a significant group of Republican voters who are saying, I prefer Rick Santorum, but Mitt Romney is more likely to win, and that's why I would vote for him. In fact, that is actually not a safe conclusion. When we do the head-to-head with Obama and Romney, we see that Obama is about 9% ahead. Obama and Santorum still 9% ahead. It isn't, in fact, very different at all. And Gingrich would be a full 14% behind. So there isn't as much difference as all of that, in spite of the fact that almost nobody outside the right of the Republican Party agrees with him on a key values issue for him, whether it's morally right or wrong to have birth control and so forth. This is interesting because it does suggest, because remember from the previous slide that that people actually, that Santorum versus Obama was the same as Romney versus Obama, but people don't really vote on these values issues, that however out on one side is on that, that isn't in fact what people worry about. What they do worry about, it's the old thing of the economy stupid, is this is the issue that, of course, will drive the election itself. This is our state of the economy. Do you think the economy is getting better or worse? And if you look at that pattern, for the first time we have an exactly or nearly exactly equal. And if you compare that graph with the next graph, direction of the company, slightly different in numbers, but exactly the same pattern. So that's the wrong place. If you look at the Obama approval, it is again the same pattern after obviously the initial enthusiasm of the election and so on. You wears down. You have that slight difference there. But if you look at the last section, the last 2 years, those three graphs all exactly the same pattern, and suggesting very strongly, and here's the approval on the economy, exactly the same pattern. These things are totally linked. It is the economy that will drive the election results, we think, as it always has, and of course the economy has started to turn much better for Obama. Just a last little look at this one, out of sequence one. Congress approval has been historically going down. It continues to go down. Some of the more hopeful Democrats in our company are saying this shows you that we can retake Congress. Actually, our numbers suggest that that the Republicans will hold on to Congress and in fact will take the Senate, but will lose the presidency. Thanks very much.
Stefan, thank you very much indeed. For me, this is a first because it's the first time I've ever introduced a panel where there are two Stefans on the same panel. Let me introduce you now to Stefan Halper, Republican, previously worked with George Bush Senior many years ago, and is a Senior Fellow and Director of American Studies, Department of Politics and International Studies at the University of Cambridge. And delighted to have you here. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I just wanted to thank you for your kind introduction. Stephan Shakespeare, but different spelling, and for this event. And just to say a special thanks to Dr. Joel Rogers, who is the YouGov person running the Cambridge effort, one of my principal researchers and analysts over the years, and he was instrumental in this as well, so thank you to Joel. When I first thought about this issue, I thought, well, my first instinct was to say the quick answer to this question about whether U.S. elections will impact Europe or Britain, the quick answer is to say no, there'll be no direct impact, certainly not in the near term. But now I'm not so sure. The current Republican carnival offers little prospect of fielding a winner in the general election. Romney will arrive at the starting line shredded in every dimension. He'll be vulnerable to attack on matters ranging from healthcare to the auto industry to his Mormonism, to inconsistencies in his presentation, lack of coherent defining themes, and of course the most important point is that he doesn't excite his base, and that's very serious. Therefore, I see a second Obama term. So what does that mean? It means that the volte-face in American foreign policy that was characterized by the Libya challenge is likely to continue. The U.S. will seek UN support for force projection exercise. It'll work with its allies. It will use NATO if possible. It will avoid boots on the ground and instead provide intelligence, reconnaissance, command and control of the battle space. So it'll be a Libyan-type template that you see going forward if Obama is reelected. We'll see no rush to war in Iraq, not the kind of thing that we had in Iraq. We will see no sustained nation-building efforts as in Afghanistan, something Mr. Romney seems to like to talk about. We will see public opinion and the administration move further towards a realism that engages strictly on matters of that challenge U.S. national interests. Implicit in this is a message for Europe and the UK. If you want to do something, if you're outraged by a tyrant, you pay for it. If you're outraged by things you find ethically and morally unacceptable, then you need to have the air and the naval assets to operationalize your concerns. 1 to 2% of GNP for defense spending is not adequate. Now, that's not to say the U.S. won't help. There will be help, but it'll be limited, focused, and designed to support an ally, not to lead the charge. I should underscore at this point that the pivot away from the Near East reflects the view that terrorism is no longer a #1 threat for the U.S., that the further commitment of time and management and money to bring Palestinians and Israelis together is not going to work out at this time. And we would formally intervene, for example, in Syria, and would engage with Iran only if our interests or allies are directly attacked. National security analysts, considering the totality of challenges facing the United States in the 21st century, have shifted their attention to the Far East, namely China. Beyond China's use of cybercrime and cyber warfare to promote its interests, beyond the subsidies of the export sector, currency manipulation that have unfairly impacted U.S. and other economies around the world, China's territorial claims in the South China Sea violate traditional and customary global commitments to open sea lanes, and you could see a confrontation on that. China's claims and threats over the last 2 years have resulted in a new political military set of relationships with a number of countries in the region, some of them longtime U.S. allies, so you will see the U.S. moving more in that direction. Finally, let me say that, allow me to say that the U.S. is seeking improved relations with Russia while remaining fully committed to NATO. Thus, Washington, in the second Obama term, is likely to remain compatible and supportive of European initiatives in the diplomatic and military realm. Thanks. I only had 4 minutes.
Stefan, that was staggeringly good. Stefan had said to me that he'd been asked to prepare 10 minutes and sort of kind of blanched when I said, you know, could you do it in 4 or 5 minutes? And that was a real tour de force in a very short space of time. So thank you so much for that. you get my Chairs Award for being favourite panellist so far, but we've only heard from one. Right, let me introduce... let me introduce someone who needs not much introduction. Bonnie Greer, OBE, playwright, deputy chair of the British Museum, wrote her memoir, Music, History, Obama Music, born in Chicago but has been living in Britain since the late 1980s, and a great joy to have in British public life someone as energetic as you. So,
Oh, so sweet. Thank you.
yeah, it's a great pleasure. Right, and I think you're going to do your...
Yeah, because I'll disappear behind that lectern. So I'm going to sit here. And I'll try and be as elegant and brief as Stefan was. It was gorgeous. And I have to say, I'm like agreeing with almost everything, just about everything he said. So I don't know how we're going to do this. I made just a couple of bullet points, and so just for discussion. The first topic, the U.S. election so far. Number one, the Republicans are running a long campaign against an incumbent, not the best strategy in our multi-platform age, while the so-called elites in the Tea Party struggle for the heart and the soul of the party. Number two, the Republican brand has been damaged, and that's not just me talking, that's several Republican pundits saying that, no doubt, by the debates, the mudslinging, etc. Even diehard Republicans are troubled by the negativity. But at least with Romney's wins in Michigan and Arizona, the white knight search is over for a while as far as Republican elites are concerned, but the social conservatives are still not happy, and this has to be a deep worry for the party. Three, Romney won among people concerned with two things, as Stefan. Shakespeare said, the economy, because it's still the economy stupid, and that's what matters for people, and electability. The Republicans won't decide before May or June what they're going to do. Number four, the longer the primary goes on, the further to the right Romney, an intrinsically center-right guy, has to move. Of course, the Democrats are delighted by this because they are cornering the Republicans, making them look like the extremist leaders of the lower house of Congress, which right now is dysfunctional and has one of the lowest approval rates in U.S. history. The Democrats will try to paint Romney as a rich, out-of-touch downsizer with a celebrity attached. That's Donald Trump, who's known on TV for telling people you're fired. Plus, add to that, 90% of Romney's ads are negative, as are his PACs. These PACs pursue a scorched earth policy, and that I think most Americans are, across the spectrum, pretty damn tired of. 5, on Super Tuesday in 2 weeks, Ohio and Virginia are the most important states, and that's the ones that the Democratic campaign ads are focusing on. Romney has spent about 30 million dollars of his own money to get this far, and for the first time yesterday, he gave out the name and address of his website in order to raise money. B, what do the elections mean for British interests? 1, frankly, in the main, there's very little knowledge or interest in the UK from most U.S. citizens, so no matter who gets into office, as Stefan said, that ain't going to change. The UK does all of the running regarding the special relationship for the most part because it's in our interest, the UK's, to do so. By the way, the term special relationship, as far as American administrations are concerned, also applies to Israel, Mexico, and Canada, and these are the nations that I can think of off the top of my head. Number 2, the special relationship does not extend to anything that goes against the U.S.'s interests. For example, any support of the UK's claim the Falklands is not in the main in the regional interest politically or economically of the United States. It will be fascinating to see if the Falklands thing escalates how the White House, whoever is in charge of it, will handle things. The Republicans might be a little bit more sympathetic to any Falklands situation because its party would be more likely to harbor the notion of the primacy of the Protestant English-speaking peoples, but this notion won't cut much ice with many Americans, particularly the rapidly growing Latino population, which would see the Falklands as not much more than a colonial outpost, and the UK as a European nation which should stay in its own hemisphere. And lastly, also, you might say that literally positive interest in the UK is not in his current president's DNA. He claims that his grandfather, I believe, was tortured during the emergency in Kenya in the 50s, and the president has actually written about this. From Obama, the UK will get a polite listen, but not much more. This president looks around the top tables of Britain in politics, the media, business, the arts, science, the opinion formers, and largely does not see racial or gender diversity, a very, very important matter to him, at least philosophically, and I'm afraid that in my opinion, for Barack Obama, the special relationship will be a minor one in the grand scheme of things unless we are needed, that is, for a Security Council vote. For Mitt Romney, the Republicans have a great deal of sentimentality for Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher. So there would be a bit more contact, but believe me, it would be of the slightly sentimental old school kind. Obama and the Democrats would challenge the UK to change. Romney and the Republicans to continue with the Downton Abbey, World War II, stiff upper lip, God and Queen, Cheerio chaps view of this nation, which is frankly garbage. So in the end, the re-election of Barack Obama would be the best for the UK because we would have to change mightily to get his full attention. Thank you.
Bonnie, that was wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. And entertaining and stimulating simultaneously. Matthew, I wonder whether you could give us a little taste of how you think the special relationship, if there is such a thing, will be affected. Matthew is, Jamison is Consultant Fellow at RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, which I'm sure you all know is the oldest defence, security and foreign policy think tank that there is. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Well, it's great to be here with all of you tonight, and I'd just like to echo Stefan's comments to pay tribute to Joel Rogers' leadership with Cambridge YouGov, which is a fantastic outfit, and I was very pleased to attend in September. It's also a great delight to share a platform with Stefan Halper, whose wonderful lectures I greatly enjoyed as an undergraduate at Cambridge back in those halcyon days. But the Anglo-American alliance, commonly referred to as the special relationship, we British tend to get very neurotic, I think, about this relationship, and we tend to worry very much about what Americans think about Britain. And you can see this in the press with all sorts of sort of looking around for snubs and tensions and so on. But really, at the end of the day, it is an institutionalized and structural, systematic relationship that will carry on and transcend any change in the White House, any change in Downing Street. The huge interactions between the American and the British publics in business and culture and commerce and so on will go on no matter what happens in November. But having said that, I do believe that the Anglo-American alliance, special relationship, whatever, does face significant challenges in this decade. To my mind, it comes really not from a change from a President Obama to perhaps a President Romney or God forbid, a President Santorum, but really rather things that are going on in Britain in terms of the planned defence cuts as part of the coalition's austerity package of the 81 billion cuts. There's going to be about a 7.5% reduction in the UK's defence budget. And that's going to have an enormous impact on Britain's ability to fight alongside the United States in future conflicts and war zones, which is really at the heart of the Anglo-American alliance, as we see in Afghanistan, in Iraq. In times of great crisis, that's when Britain and America really show that they are very close and that they cooperate in fighting wars. And after these defence cuts, Britain will have a much reduced capability to fight future wars, to project power abroad. It's very uncertain whether we could even fight another Falkland-style campaign. And that will be very detrimental to the Anglo-American alliance, and it will be noted in Washington in terms of Britain's value to the alliance. In terms of President Obama and Britain, it is, as I think Bonnie and Stefan have made clear, he has a lukewarm attitude to Britain. Steve Clemens carried out a very interesting analysis of the number of times that President Obama referred to 45 different countries in key speeches, policy statements, and interviews within the first 17 months of his administration. And it seems as though Britain is just a blip on Mr. Obama's teleprompter. The UK received just 8 mentions in the first 17 months of the Obama presidency, barely ahead of Indonesia with 6 and Kenya with 5. In contrast, China was mentioned 58 times, India 46, Russia 28, even South Africa and Brazil warranted 17 and 16 mentions respectively. And among the European states, Germany received 25 mentions, which is 3 times more than Britain, and France 17. And I think this was really symbolized whenever President Obama received Gordon Brown for the first time at the White House in March 2009. And Mr. Brown was denied an official state dinner. The Rose Garden press conference was also denied. And he was given the rather grand state gift of 25 DVDs, which didn't even work in the United Kingdom. So I think that that sort of captures very much Mr. Obama's attitude to Britain. Having said that, I think actually it would probably suit Mr. Cameron very much actually to continue to deal with Barack Obama, because in terms of his own political position and his dealings with his coalition partners, the Lib Dems, I think the last thing he's going to want is another radical, militarist, adventurist Republican president in the mold of George W. Bush, who was going to want to launch other incursions abroad. So I think that the alliance will continue as it always has. It has weathered many crises, such as the Suez crisis and all sorts of other blips, but it will stay strong, though I think Britain has to realize that its value to the United States is going to continue to go down and down, especially as rising powers come up and America's focus shifts very much to the Asia-Pacific region, which wouldn't be a bad thing, because Europe, I think, really needs to take more of the burden for its own security and stand more on its own 2 feet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me now introduce our final panellist, filmmaker, former Republican, but now voting Obama, and I think voting Obama again?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Carol Gould, ladies and gentlemen.
I wanted to mention a quote from Mike Huckabee, who is the former governor of Arkansas, now a Fox News presenter. And he had a brief run for president 4 years ago. And he said that the reason why Americans can't warm to Mitt Romney is because he reminds you of the last boss who fired you. But I wanted to throw our minds back to 9/11. And at that time we thought that the crisis in the financial industry because of 9/11 would lead to some sort of meltdown. And in fact, Wall Street and the financial world recovered remarkably at that time. But really and truly, the real meltdown came a few years later from bankers, the dot-com slump. So people seem to think that that event could have brought down the world, but it didn't. But in recent years, we've seen the meltdown, and we're still in a precarious situation of global financial turmoil. And so my idea of the relationship between the US and the UK revolves around people like Timothy Geithner and Ben Bernanke being able to get along with our Treasury officials and with our financial institutions in Britain. We are still in a precarious situation with the Eurozone, with various countries being bailed out and bailed out. Greece could still go under. So, and the United States is involved in this, inevitably. So we do need to have this special relationship continuing on the global financial stage. There also are, I would call, instability in many theaters of the world, so including Syria, the Eurozone, Israel and Iran. And we need to sustain an alliance because of these situations as well. Anybody who says that the US is going to stand back if Israel attacks Iran isn't in the real world. I do a great deal of television in the Iranian, Turkish, and Arab world. And the passions in those countries are just incalculable. And we do need to have an alliance with the US to be able to relate to what is making that part of the world still very, very angry. Now, I attended a talk by the American commentator Erwin Stelzer 5 years ago, and he elaborated on the perils of anti-Americanism, it's the subject of my book, which I wrote 3 years ago. And I had warned against the irrational hatred of the United States globally. But 3/4 of the way through his speech, a very elderly man who was sitting, it was in someone's home, and he was sitting in an easy chair. He was sort of like a George Smiley, a retired Smiley. And he said, in real life, the relationship between the British and the American intelligence services remains excellent. And he said, whether we're worried about terrorism or relations with Middle Eastern countries and the Israeli-Palestinian situation, that we still get on, but it is very, very important that that good relationship continues. And that we needn't worry, he said, we needn't worry about anti-USA demos and rhetoric in Trafalgar Square if the major figures in the intelligence world are getting on as well as they have for the past 60 or 70 years. But by the same token, there are some strange bedfellows emerging, and it doesn't seem to be mentioned very much lately, but I remember the uproar about a year ago when Brazil and Turkey went to Iran, when there was a relationship established amongst the three countries. And the United States, several officials actually admitted that they were, to use this slang word in England, gobsmacked by the fact that these three countries were establishing major trade relationships. So I do think that the US and the UK have got to have their eye on the ball, together, separately, but the alliance will also deal with situations like these strange new bedfellows, as I call it. So I'd like to move, have I got enough time to talk about stimulus?
Very briefly.
Okay. That in 2008, Mitt Romney said the car industry must not be rescued. The federal government shouldn't put any money into it, but Obama took the risk and he bailed out the auto industry. I wouldn't say it's booming, but it's coming back to life. Jobs are being created, and of all things, the Chinese love Buicks. So they're buying tens of thousands of Buicks. If they all buy Buicks, then maybe the pollution cloud over China will lift, because American cars do have mufflers. So this business of stimulus versus austerity is a big issue now. This country and Europe, we've all been talking about cuts, cuts, cuts. But what Obama has been concentrating on for the past 4 years is stimulus. And that seems to be working. And even if you're not particularly inclined to like President Obama, what he and his administration are doing seem to be reviving the economy. So I think the coalition here, in terms of UK-US relations, should take note of the effects of stimulus versus cuts.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed. I'll open it up to the floor in a minute. I just want to tease out a few points. Just, Stefan, do you buy that argument? That actually the jobs are coming back now, and that Obama made the right gamble in going for the stimulus program, and it's left the Republicans not very much place to go, except to say, no, it would have been better if they had all gone bankrupt.
Absolutely. I think that Obama did the proper thing by injecting funds into the economy. The rescue package, the $868 billion for the banks and other parts of the economy was very important. Supporting the auto industry was very important. But this points to a broader question. The argument here is about the size and role of government. It is about what we expect government to do in circumstances that are unclear or threatening or turn critical. And that is a kind of a pivot around which good portions of this election will turn. Obama and the Republicans saying government ought to be smaller, it ought to be more focused, and Obama taking the opposite view.
And Bonnie, just coming back to the question of the debate about British interests, do you think it matters who is the president, who is the prime minister? Actually, Anglo-US relations are dictated to by the fact that we're both on the Security Council, we've got a certain common language, we've got, and those things, you just looked at the move between what happened when Clinton left and Blair was still prime minister and George W. Bush arrived. Two completely different presidents, the relationship was as close, some would argue, if not closer.
Well, I think, as Carol pointed out, I think it's important. There are different levels of this relationship, of course, and thank you for saying that. We have very strong military and security bonds. That's one level. But a president serves the same purpose as the sovereign in this country. The president is a figurehead. He or she sets the tone of anything that goes down, particularly internationally. So it does matter. The president of the United States at present is not interested as much as maybe he should be in this part of the world. That sets the tone for Joe Blogs in the street and people voting. So I think it does matter very much who's there, and that whole thing is very important.
Go on, very briefly.
Well, I just wanted to say that on the special relationships, since we're talking about it so much, there are very vital intelligence links.
Oh, yeah.
The intelligence side is critical. So are the defense links. But we all read the same fairy tales. We share a language. We share a literature. And as Matthew pointed out, the institutional framework is very, very strong. So I think if you look back over the years, relationships between presidents and prime ministers have risen and fallen, but the relationship has remained vibrant and powerful because of multiple links on multiple levels, business, politics, and so on. It is not helpful, it seems to me, to denigrate this relationship because it's grown up in very difficult times and been very productive.
Let me just bring Matthew in here, because that's an interesting point. I mean, I was the BBC's Paris correspondent in 2003, at the time of the invasion of Iraq, when Chirac had said, you know, je dis non, quelles que soient les circonstances, you know, whatever happens, I'm going to say no to this. Blair's role then was to be the bridge between America and Europe. Does Britain still have that role to play?
Yes, I think it does, but the problem is really that it's sometimes an insurmountable task, really. I mean, because as we've seen throughout this Eurozone crisis, the real driver in Europe is the Franco-German axis. And when France and Germany come together, as they did over the Iraq War, it really, you know, Britain's never going to be able to break through that. It can rally those Eastern European countries, which are much more Atlanticist, and also form alliances with Atlanticist governments, such as it did with Silvio Berlusconi in Italy and José María Aznar in Spain. But the whole concept of this bridge between America, between Britain acting as a bridge between America and Europe, I think has always been counterproductive, because it's a role that Britain can never really live up to.
Carol, just let me ask you a final point before I open it up to the floor, which is you've talked and you've written about anti-Americanism, and when I was in Paris I saw it a great deal. Do you think that has dissipated with the Obama administration? That where there was a high tide of anti-Americanism that was, you know, maybe so as a result of the invasion of Iraq and other things as well, that actually that has diminished now with the Obama presidency?
It depends on what part of the world you're talking about. I feel that it has lessened here. There's no doubt. Americans don't get attacked the minute they walk into a grocery store during the time, as they did during the time when Bush was president. But because I do an enormous amount of Arab, Persian, Turkish television that broadcasts to the Muslim world, and I'm often on for an hour with 4 debaters, one in Beirut, one in Damascus, for example, one in Tehran, one in Baghdad. The feeling of hostility to America, mainly to do with the American support for Israel, has never dissipated. And in fact, I have to laugh when I hear my Jewish friends saying Obama is the worst thing ever to happen to Israel. Then I go the next day to Iranian television and I'm told that Obama is a Zionist agent. But it actually is palpable, the hostility in that part of the world. In the Palestinian territories.
Just to pick up on what Stefan was saying, we mustn't forget that power is shifting south and east. The world's going to look very different in 20 years. Yes. And what the president is doing now is looking in that direction. We, as a group, haven't quite got that message yet. UK banks are starting to look at sub-Saharan Africa because there's huge commerce going on between China and Africa. So we've got to start looking in that direction. I think the president's turning that way. It's as simple as that.
Right, let me get questions.
In 1956, the United States came down very decisively against the idea of a colonial war and supporting England against the Suez Canal crisis. If, in the unlikely event, something happens over the Falkland Islands, what is your take on the stance of the United States supporting England in any conflict that may happen?
Okay, I've got to say that I've been on my BBC course. We ought to refer to it as Britain, I think. Otherwise, I'll have the Irish, Welsh, and the Scottish very angry with me. Yeah, gentleman there. There's a hand up there. I can see a hand. I can't see the body that goes with the hand. The lady here.
Thank you very much, John. David Brame. it comes back to Bonnie's last point about power shifting south and eastwards. There are many elections this year. One at the end of the year is the United States. You've got the China transition, etc., etc. Do our fascination with the American election is this going to be the last time we have this fascination? Are we going to be looking towards other countries and their elections? Also, a quick follow-up: if the French election goes the way that is, I'm not sure it's predicted, but it's looking more likely with Francois Hollande winning, is that going to change completely the dynamic of the British-UK relationship?
Right, excellent. And the lady here, if we could get the microphone down here. Yeah, you've got it.
I might be unique in this audience, having been a chair of C&D with a brother working for the National Security Agency. but let me say that I can only echo what both Bonnie and Carol have said about the changing demographics. I come from California. It's being reclaimed by the people who originally owned it, the Latino Americans. And you guys got to get real. I'm sorry for all the Brideshead Revisited people in the Henry Jackson Society, but you know, for the growing Latino population.
This is a speech and not a question at the moment. I'm just,
okay, I'm going to say,
observing.
who's gonna bring the reality to Britain? Carol and Bonnie.
Thank you. Right.
My mom ran Ronald Reagan's first campaign for governor, by the way.
Oh my God.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Stefan, deal with that question that we had over there. You know, yeah, about the Falklands.
I have to say that sympathy in the United States will be with England, with the UK, on the Falklands issue. There is very little cohesion within the Hispanic community on the question of the Falklands or Argentine foreign policy or claims. My suspicion is that the State Department will make an enormous effort to prevent this problem from arising as a kinetic confrontation. I highly doubt we're going to see the kind of confrontation with warships and so on we saw last time. So it'll be a negotiated arrangement. It will be based on precedent and the law, and the politics of the thing within the United States are not likely to be decisive.
Right. Matthew, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I think certainly if there's a change in administration with Mitt Romney, then the administration and the State Department will back Britain very strongly over the Falklands War. And it's interesting that Mitt Romney appointed Niall Gardner to head up his Europe Working Group. And Mr. Gardner is a former aide to Lady Thatcher and runs the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation in Washington. So there'll be a very Reaganite line. But it must be remembered that the Reagan administration
were pretty equivocal.
Wobbled, yeah, exactly. So I still think that the US would back Britain over the Falklands, but it's just a question of actually whether Britain would be able to do anything, because our power projection now is going to be cut significantly with the defense cuts that are coming into place.
Right. Did you want to?
I agree with Stefan's second part of what he said about it. This is going to be the way it's going to play out, because he's absolutely right. But Stefan's first statement about the lack of Latino Hispanic cohesion is way off the mark. And I'll tell you, from Marco Rubio, who's Republican and a senator and a rising star in the Republican Party, and probably will be the at least candidate for vice president in 2016, which would be a brilliant move. There's no way that the Latino population will allow the United Kingdom to raise any sand on a Spanish-speaking claim for any part of that hemisphere. It just ain't. It'll be crazed. It won't happen. It won't happen.
Well, I have to respectfully disagree. Mr. Rubio is a very ambitious man, and when he encounters the Republican hierarchy regarding a faraway issue, which his constituency is not particularly interested in, he's going to be told to be quiet and sit down. That'll be it.
All right. I tell you what, we'll leave the Falklands there, and we'll leave you respectfully disagreeing with one another.
I'll pay you $50.
Yeah. Okay. You can take the side bets afterwards.
Right.
A quick comment about the Falklands, which is that Argentina this week has been stopping cruise liners from docking So
I can tell you. I mean, I've been presenting the news this afternoon. The ambassador has been called in by the Foreign Office to explain ask what's going on.
The other thing is, when I'm on television to the Muslim world, many of the people with whom I am debating on every program, whether it's far-fetched or not, I think it is sort of a parallel universe, they're equating the British, quote, occupation of the Falklands with the Israeli, the Jewish, quote, occupation of Palestine. And I have a tough time being screamed at about this recently. This is a consistent mantra that I'm hearing.
Let us move on to the question that we heard from David a moment ago about will there be a power shift if Hollande is elected in France? Bonnie.
Yes, indeed. Francois Hollande is the Socialist Party candidate. He is going to win. He is already, well, he's going to win not because he's great, but because people are so sick of Sarkozy. They don't even care anymore in Paris, and they want him out. So he's going to win because and probably win on the second round. And what will happen, because what he's running on is our typical wonderful French things, and it's going to be bash the bankers, and Obama's getting his second term will actually match what Hollande wants to do and what the Socialist Party will do, so there will be a turn away. Now, in the news, they said today that Monsieur Hollande was denied a talk with David Cameron. In fact, he did not approach David Cameron. So it's going to be very interesting.
And apparently Ed Miliband gave him a bottle of whiskey.
Exactly.
There we are. Carol, do you want to add anything?
I agree with Bonnie.
All right, okay, fine. Well, let's not. Anyone who would like to disagree with that? No,
I don't frequent Parisian salons.
Oh no!
Okay, arrête, ça suffit, as they would say in French. And the question we had there about, I'm not sure.
The reality.
Yeah, the reality check.
American voters.
Yeah. What Stefan is right about, and he's absolutely right in the sense that the cohesion is what we understand cohesion to be, about people just, these groups, that group, that group. The Latino populations are made up of many nations, but they also are coming together on issues. They are the floating voters, the largest floating voter group in the United States. Republicans and Democrats are going after them, and they will decide 2016, and they're coming together, and they're coming together quite quickly.
Okay, right, so let's get 3 more questions in. The gentleman here. There's a woman in green at the very, very back. I don't know whether we can get a microphone to her. Thank you very much. And the gentleman in the front row in the red tie. So, sir, you first, then the lady in green at the back.
Yeah. David Cameron's recently been supportive of Sarkozy. Who should he go to meet in America? Should he support Romney?
Okay, good question. Lady in the back there in the green.
Hello, my name is Shana Perlman, and I'm the author of The Palin Effect, which is a book about class anxiety in American politics, available now on Amazon. I have a twofold question. Stefan Halper described the Republican nomination process as a carnival, and I'm wondering if we only have ourselves to blame about that. After all, the Republican candidates are hardly ever asked about Syria, Iran. In fact, Marco Rubio has never been asked about the Falkland Islands. There are no Google results for this. And does this lack of interest in foreign affairs in the campaign itself underscore the abdication of democratic principles that we used to care about, like Guantanamo Bay, extraordinary rendition, the drone wars in Yemen and Pakistan, which are going on right now and used to bother us and now don't so much?
Okay, thank you very much. Interesting question. Yes, sir. Here, microphone over there to the gentleman in the red tie.
Hi. So it seems quite unlikely that David Cameron's ever going to have to deal with President Romney. So looking inwards, he seems to have incredible trouble sort of getting on the right side of people. In the debates, he offered Rick Perry legitimately a $10,000 bet over whether or not he'd got something wrong, and recently asked whether or not he liked NASCAR, said, yeah, I'm not the most ardent of fans, paused for a moment, and then said, but I have a lot of friends who are NASCAR team owners. What advice would the panel give him to connect with the regular people in America, and how will that enable him to connect with the world leaders he might meet if he ever, hopefully not, becomes president?
Matthew, who should David Cameron go and support?
Well, it links in quite nicely with, I believe, the lady's point about Evil and War, while I'm a great admirer of Evil and War, I don't own a teddy bear, so I'm not sure I'd fall into the brideshead category of the deluded when it comes to the Anglo-American alliance. And we do need a reality check on that. And that's why I think it would probably be best for Mr. Cameron actually to stick with Mr. Obama, because I think that that relationship and the way that the president has played it is beneficial for David Cameron and his government. And I think the last thing that David Cameron needs is a sort of a Reagan figure in the White House, or a George W. Bush, where he would have to really put his neck out to follow in, whether it be more robust military action with Iran or so on. Because as we saw what happened with Tony Blair, the public really now in Britain just won't tolerate that, and it can destroy political positions. So I'd say for David Cameron to stick with Barack.
Carol?
Yes, generally we're on the same wavelength. Between now and November is a long time. And as I said before, there is a possibility there could be a situation with Iran and Israel. The Arab Spring is descending into something that we didn't want to see happen, but it's chaos, anarchy, and slaughter, most particularly in Syria. So I believe that Cameron and Obama have to have a close relationship up to the wire. I actually believe a president shouldn't really get involved. Sorry, the Prime Minister of Britain shouldn't get involved in the presidential election or show a favoritism. But between now and November, there are going to be major international events that are going to need the two of them to stay together, even though they're of opposing political beliefs. Bonnie. And I want to thank the lady who gave me a lozenge, because you've saved my life tonight. Thank you so much.
Can I just say quickly, is we have to remember that the Republican Party was pretty much wiped out after 2008. There weren't many people who registered and voted Republican. The second thing is, I mean, the popular vote was strong. Popular vote was strong, but they lost the Electoral College. Seriously. And the second thing is that the Republican Party allowed itself, and this is a great tragedy for the United States, allowed itself between about 2007 up to about 2011 to become the political wing of Fox News. Fox News has in fact moved to the center now because of its success in the primary debates, in which it's been doing very well. But the Republican Party is now stuck with an insurgency called the Tea Party. One of the issues is that they can't go into to talk about foreign policy because the Tea Party ain't interested in it. So they've got to now sort out that insurgency within their party, and perhaps then they can go and talk about foreign policy.
All right, hang on. No, because we're getting on to a different topic here, which was not the question. So I want to stick to the question. Stefan.
Which question?
Well, I think Bonnie. I thought we were doing who should.
Oh, I thought because there was another question about foreign. Yeah, there were foreign things talked about. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Why don't you do? Who should David Cameron support? And the foreign policy question as well, because Bonnie has elegantly taken us on.
Well, I mean, who David Cameron should support is perfectly obvious, and that's no one. He should stay neutral and pick up the pieces at the end. That's what prime ministers have traditionally done. That's what he ought to do. The lady in the back with the green dress, I thought, asked an interesting question about who we really have to blame for this. I used the word carnival in describing the Republican process. And there was a very interesting article written by Brzezinski. It's in The Globalist. It's about how poor education and broad ignorance in the United States has rendered the country unable to isolate the more important issues from the less important issues, and it's pushed the conversation, the political discourse, into these very funny places. What we've had with Palin, Mr. Kane, Rick Perry, who couldn't remember the agencies he wanted to eliminate, is a discussion about a group of non-issues. The Republican Party is broken into two versions, two themes. One is a theme based on a kind of return to the culture wars of the 80s, abortion questions, prayer in schools, gun control, things like that. That's the Santorum side. And there is a large group rising from the Tea Party that is very interested in those issues and knows nothing about issues beyond American shores. And then there's the Romney side. And he's a manager, and he's going forward with, presumably, an offer to manage the country a bit better. That conversation really hasn't joined. It hasn't been a productive one. And who we have to blame, I think in part is the media. The media could be asking tough questions that forced candidates in both sort of camps to address core questions. They're not doing it.
I'd be interested in your take. I mean, I'm just going to leap to the defence of the media.
Yeah.
Isn't the problem that in America, you know, apart from on the East Coast and the West Coast, vast numbers of people do not have passports, they live in America, and their focus is on America?
Well, there is an explanation for that, which is that Americans, from the dustman up to the CEO, get 2 weeks vacation a year. They don't get these vast vacation and sick leave benefits that Europeans do. But getting back to the point Bonnie made about the Tea Party and Stefan as well, lest we forget that the Tea Party did elect 6 senators.
Sure.
And the right-wing Republicans reclaimed Congress in 2010. It went from being Democrat to being Republican, and not just Republican, but the Democrats are going to have to win a lot of seats to get Congress back. So they did have a tremendous effect, and they're not all bad in many people's eyes.
Yeah, I think, but Carol, I think with the 2010 midterm elections, it was going to be a real struggle for the Democrats to hold on to the House and the Senate with, I think it was something like 8.9 or even 9-point-something% unemployment. And really it seems like whoever is in power has total ownership over the economy. And that, I think, really lies behind it, because the Tea Party has seemed to have overreached itself. And picking up on Bonnie's points and so on, the Republican Party voter base is now really, it's too old, it's too white, it's too male, and an increasingly racially and ethnically diverse country. It's very interesting, the data, that in 2020, if the Republican candidate wins the same percentage of the Hispanic, the African American, and the Asian American vote as Senator McCain did, the Democratic candidate will win by 14 points. So I think 2010 was a little bit of a blip with that, because there was a backlash on the economy, and I wouldn't be surprised. The Democrats have an opportunity to retake the House. They've been raising a great deal of money, but it will be tough, but they have an opportunity.
Okay, I want to go to the final question now. You've suddenly become the comms director for the Romney campaign. How do you make him human? Carol?
Mitt Romney will always antagonize a certain group, a certain portion of America, because he's a Mormon, and Americans are a little bit distrustful. They don't trust people with what they call extreme minority religions. It would be a tough call. And I agree,
So,
I agree with Mike
so hang
Huckabee
on,
that
hang
he
on,
looks
I
like the last boss that fired you.
Okay, so Carol doesn't
Americans
want the
do
job
not
as the
warm to
comms
him.
director.
I definitely would, I would find it an uphill battle.
Yeah, okay, Stefan.
First of all, on the Mormon issue, 30% of Americans said they would not vote for Romney in 2008 because he was a Mormon. Now it's down to 13. I think that that issue is really beginning to fade quite a lot. But the issue with Romney, I mean, it's not an easy job to humanize this man. But there are some things he can do. For starters, he can wear a suit and stop wearing jeans and stop trying to be something he isn't. It seems to me that he needs to stop moving with the breeze. If people had the feeling that he had clear, firm, focused themes, that he actually had a position that was critical for his vision of America, then I think it would help him a great deal. And I think he's coming to the point, having achieved what he had to do with the right wing of his party, he's now beginning, or at least beginning, to find a time when he can move to the center. And I expect he'll probably do that. The other thing, I'd be very pleased if he would stop exaggerating. You know, it's not necessary. He has a good argument. Obama has clear vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities should be exploited. We need to have a really tough conversation about the size of government, its role in various parts of the economy and social and society.
Bonnie, sorry.
Look, I mean, I think we should be really frank about this. Obama doesn't do human either, okay? Not really. Both of them are Harvard-trained lawyers, and this is what we're going to have. We're going to have 2 Harvard-trained lawyers in the debate. They're both highly intelligent men, both highly driven, highly focused. This is who they are. What I would do for Mitt Romney is, and I'm old enough to remember his daddy, George, who was the presidential candidate in 1968 when I was just starting university and just starting my political interest. George Romney was a great guy. I wasn't voting for him, but he was a great guy. It'll be difficult for Mitt Romney, but just because he's not human doesn't mean he can't be president of the United States. And we have to really, no, seriously, we really have to keep that on board. He should be who he is, be what he is. If he's like that, that's what it is. And don't mess with him, because people smell that a mile away and they hate that.
Yes, because
at
least...
Let me just bring in Matthew there.
And well, I mean, I echo Bonnie's comments about Obama. Having been a huge Hillary Clinton fan myself in 2008 and still carrying a torch for the Secretary of State to run in 2016, I could never really work out why people thought that Obama was so charismatic. He always came across as quite aloof and professorial and cold and even vain. But Romney, it's a real uphill struggle with Romney because he is so robotic and he's so just evidently out of touch with mainstream Americans. I would really play up to him as a very wholesome American, surround him constantly with his beautiful sort of Brady Bunch style family, who are so photogenic, and his gorgeous wife, and just have them around him and play up to that sort of classic baby boomer, wholesome American, swashbuckling to return American greatness, even though it's a load of baloney and it won't work and he won't be elected. But that's really the only sell you can have. Perhaps also, he was a social, well, apparently he was a social liberal in 1994 when he ran for the Senate of Massachusetts, and he was pro-gay rights back then, and he was pro-choice and so on. So maybe somehow, once he gets the nomination, if he could pull off a huge coup and maybe come out in favor of gay marriage or something like that, then that might get people's attention, but I seriously doubt it.
Right, we have run over. We were due to stop at 7:30. We've now gone, but it's just absolutely flown by, the debate that we've had this evening, for which huge thanks to you, but most of all, huge thanks to our panellists. Thank you very much indeed.